Hi, welcome to the Connected Data for 360 View of Customer session. My name is Mark Thomas, and I'm part of the Dell Technologies Data-Centric Workloads Organization, aligned to data analytics and AI in North America. And I'm joined by Scott Heath at Expero Incorporated. In this brief session, we'll provide an overview on Customer 360, what it is and why it's important. We'll review why Graph is well suited for enabling Customer 360. We'll also review a white paper, use case, and conclude with a Customer 360 demo led by Scott. So let's get started. What is Customer 360? One definition is it's the insights that come from the aggregation of and multiple connections between vast and varied data types generated by customers. Suffice it to say, customers generate a lot of data, and there's value in understanding the relationships between that data. Why Customer 360? One reason to create a Customer 360 view is the opportunity for personalized experience, such as tailored product and service recommendations and improvements on those products and services, all based on customer data. Customer data like purchase history, social media, search activity, support calls, customer reviews, and feedback. Success here strengthens competitive differentiation, which can improve corporate net promoter scores and customer retention. One Accenture survey found that consumers are likely to shop brands that have recommendations that are tailored specifically for them. Customer 360 should be considered a key enabler for executing an effective customer experience initiative. In recent research by Forrester, they found that organizations who lead in customer experience grow revenue faster, cut costs, and reduce risk better than organizations that lag in this area. The importance of customer experience can be seen in this CIO.com's 2022 State of the CIO research, where about 985 IT leaders and about 250 line of business participants were surveyed. And they found that roughly 42% ranked customer experience number 3 as areas for investment, which is up 11% from the previous year. The success of Customer 360 is in part rooted in big data, and becomes more impactful with the continued growth of the volume, velocity, and variety of data. But storing and accessing this data alone is not enough. You need a tool set that makes the relationship between the data the first-class citizen, which is where relational databases fall short and where graph databases are purpose-built. For those new to Graph, I'm sure there will be other Tiger Graph sessions that will dig more into the fundamentals of Graph. But for now, let's quickly look at 3 databases to understand why Graph is well suited for highly connected data. Starting at the bottom with relational databases. For relational databases, data is organized into sets, where these sets represent real-world entities, such as customers, orders, products, suppliers, and they're grouped in their respective tables. Entities can be linked by creating more tables, called linking tables. Doing this, however, becomes a time-consuming and a costly exercise for highly connected data such as customer data and Customer 360 use cases. So we have a rigid schema that does bode well for high-performance transactions, but poor performance for deep analytics. Let's look at Nosql Databases, such as this key value store here, which enables full flexibility to change schema as needed and allow for horizontal scaling of clusters of machines very easily, unlike relational databases. And while there is a flexible schema, NoSQL databases fall short in a couple of areas. They weren't built for transactional performance, and it takes a long time to do deep queries and analysis. For graph analytics and databases, in particular, Tiger Graph's native parallel architecture for loading real-time updates and simultaneous deep link queries, they really hit on all key requirements: flexible schema and high performance for transactions and deep analytics. So when we talk about relational systems, we're referring to the focus on storage and retrieval of real-world entities. When we talk about graph systems, we're referring to the storage and retrieval of not only the entity, but the relationship between those entities. If you're not familiar with United Healthcare Group, they're a multinational managed healthcare and insurance company. United Healthcare Group was interested in exploring how they can improve member call center operations, specifically addressing challenge areas like lengthy member call times, member satisfaction scores, and call center operating expense. One of their specific goals was to drive down average call times by about 10%. In our Dell Technologies Customer Solutions Center in Austin, Texas, we built a Tiger Graph cluster in collaboration with Tiger Graph, which was used to perform a proof of concept based on 3 underperforming queries aligned to these business challenges. The first of these 3 underperforming queries was patient record retrieval. The second, find a provider. And the third was patient similarity. For patient similarity, think of that as like a digital twin to help healthcare professionals to determine treatment regimen using other like cases as a guide. We scaled the environment from 1 node to 8 nodes, while increasing the amount of patient data from 11 million to 104 million. At 104 million patients, we demonstrated an improvement in patient record retrieval 10x better than goal. Reducing query times from minutes to seconds resulted in shorter call time. So shorter call time, greater call center specialist efficiency, which also improved member net promoter scores. And all of this collectively drove down operating expense. Turning to a use case brief with Dell Technologies, in our effort to improve customer experience, we created a vision for modernizing our customer journey. And like some organizations, our customer engagements and data transformation team realized quickly that the technology used to get us where we are today will not get us to where we need to be. In other words, in order for us to effectively execute to a highly personalized customer experience, we need to gain deeper customer insights, well beyond the transactional relationship, which is in large part our historical approach. This is where Tiger Graph comes in. Our customer experience and data transformations team within Dell, who is aligned to all of our data, including MarTech, which is marketing data, knew that Graph solution was needed and explored options. What's interesting is that it wasn't until they came across the United Healthcare Group white paper that I just mentioned that they realized they needed to incorporate Tiger Graph into their strategy. At a high level, some of the criteria our customer experience and data transformation team used to make their decision is they look for a mature graph platform. So we're roughly 100 billion per year enterprise, and we didn't want to join with a partner who we risk hugging to death, so to speak. We're looking for resiliency and reliability. We needed millisecond response time across a global infrastructure with giant data sets. Flexibility. We needed a schema that's adaptable to evolving needs without re-engineering. And of course, performance. We need the ability to scale both up and out. There are a number of different active graph use cases in flight within Dell and in various stages from POC to build. And I hope to have some updates on our success by the end of the year. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott for our Customer 360 demo.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. So what we'll see in this demonstration today is Customer 360. In our example, what we're going to do is we're going to look at 2 different individuals. We're going to look at an analyst that wants to use the power of the graph and the technology platform to start to find insights. In this case, what I'm looking for is I'm a bank and I'm looking for low customer sentiment. I'm looking for a cross-section of high influence. So what happens if I lose a banking customer and perhaps there's an intersection? Do I lose just that customer? Well, I'd like to use now the graph database, the power of Tiger, to be able to do that. So our first step here is to look at it from a regionality. The second item that you see across the bottom is our time capability. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually then going to start to look at this. Now, we could also integrate with other kinds of data. So 2-dimensional data, Tableau, Power BI. And what we can see then is we see that lost and stolen credit cards are certainly a leader in one of the reasons for dissatisfaction and potentially low sentiment for churn. Then what I'd like to do is, again, use that graph database. I want to use something called similarity or clustering, or perhaps what I'd like to do is some sort of calculation for something called Louvain similarity. In this case, what I'm looking for is taking that geography that we saw, an age demographic, and then this low sentiment level. And what I'm able to do now is run those algorithms in real time. And now what I found is a cross-section. This cross-section capability allows me to see then what is that high influence and what happens if I were to lose a high net worth individual in one of these categories. And now what I'd like to do is see what that intersection is. And in this case, what I find is that I may not just lose, in this case, perhaps Fran Farmington, But in fact, what I may do is I may lose multiple accounts because Fran is highly connected, or the influence in the graph database shows me that there are lots of other connections. So not only does he have a high net worth, but he has other high net worth individuals. So simply losing one churned customer is very, very impactful to us at the bank. So what I'd like to do now is actually come in now and say, well, how do I get to that sort of next level? And then what I'd like to do then is be able to walk through on that next side, if you will. So what I can do then is, now what I've done is I've got this abandonment risk, and I've cross-sectioned that now with the similarity here. So now what I've done is I found not just Fran Farmington, but I found other cohorts by asking TigerGraph what those sections are. And I can see that there are multiple of those. Well, perhaps what I'd like to do is run a campaign where I can target that segment. And in this case, anecdotally, we've shown that perhaps we'll offer them something on a corporate card, right? We may be able to identify what we're going to do in that particular case. Now that's important, right? Because we can do these other kinds of things, right? We may then also do some sort of spread the word or green customer retention, et cetera. We can run multiple kinds of very specific kinds of attributed responses so that we can keep this particular customer. Now, this is sort of the backside, if you will. What we'd like to do now is move to, what does the customer service representative see? In this case, I can see that we saw our friend Fran Farmington. Now, this is a customer service rep. Their side of this is I can see that, well, there are influence, activity, and sentiment. Fran, as we saw in our previous one, has been identified to this customer service rep from an analyst. And now what I can see is perhaps I want to look at a journey map. Well, Fran has multiple lines of business. We can see that he's got commercial, wealth, and personal. And his customer journey match, which again is another algorithm that we can run in TigerGraph, that says there is a high propensity for him to spend more with our firm. But we do see here that there is indeed a low sentiment over here. We see that there's a credit card dispute. And what we saw on our previous screen was that indeed credit card is a leading indicator, but I'm also drawn to the low sentiment through the graph that there is also a co-owner who also has low sentiment. So this is now a sort of a compound risk score. I can also use the graph database to see things like time or correlation. Now what I see is indeed he has lost his credit card. There was a new credit card, but he still has disputes. And so now what I'm doing is I'm adding up those dots, if you will, for our customer service rep. Then what I can do is, again, I can see other kinds of account information. And again, this dashboard could be in Tableau or other kinds of systems that you have today. But the tightly connected capability in here is really what the graph is bringing to our solutions. And then finally, I can do highly prescriptive outcomes. Again, recommendations are something that graph databases are very good at. I can use historical data to project current state and then start to create highly accurate, in fact, 80% more accurate by using that data. And I can see then that while I've got him on the phone, I can say, hey, I understand that there was a credit card there and we're going to make that right. But while I've got you here, I really can save you an enormous amount of money because we can change your home loan to be able to do that. And then we saw in our previous one for our banking capability here, we can then give these other kinds of elements here for customer retention. And then also I can look at wealth management and make some other suggestions. So again, this is hopefully a useful vignette. And back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Scott. That was awesome. And if we had more time, much more to illustrate in this demo. While our session focuses on Customer 360, please know there are many more cases where Graph is ideally suited, where it's an ideally suited tool set, as you can see here. In closing, we understand that this session was an overview, but we do have resources to continue the discussion. Starting with our Dell Technologies Executive Briefing Center, where we do technical deep dives and strategic sessions. We've got a joint TigerGraph and Dell Technologies Customer 360 workshop series coming up, and details will be shared after the summit. And lastly, we have our Dell Technologies Customer Solutions Center, the one that I mentioned in the United Healthcare Group proof of concept. And that about wraps it up for this session. I hope it was beneficial, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of the summit. Thank you.